It is said that there are rivers so old they no longer hurry, not because the land is flat, or because the sea is near, but because time itself has softened around them, like a veil laid gently over stone. And when night arrives and moonlight begins to spill across the surface, these rivers do something rare. They listen. Beneath the silence, you can almost feel the water holding its breath, still as a mirror, patient as a shrine. The reeds stand upright like watchers. The pebbles along the shore shine faintly, as if each one remembers a name it will not speak aloud. And somewhere in the distance, where memory fades into mist, there is the sense of a gate that cannot be seen, but can be felt. Whispers tell us that on a night like this, the Jade Emperor did not send trumpets. No banners, no bright decree nailed to temple doors, only a quiet invitation folded into the wind. Come, if you can, and be counted. It drifted through bamboo groves and over sleeping villages, passed through cracked courtyard stones, slipped beneath roof tiles where incense ash had settled like dust from older centuries. And it reached the ears of creatures who understood omens better than language. The invitation did not command. It simply opened a doorway. Marked by the moon, the river became the threshold, a sacred crossing, as ancient as breath. Some believe it was not meant to be a race at all, not in the loud way we imagine races now, not a clamor of bodies, not a storm of shouting, but a ritual, a choosing done in secret, a selection arranged behind a veil. Where the riverbank curves, the mud is dark and soft. In forgotten corners of the earth, such mud keeps records better than scrolls. It holds the press of a hoof, kiss of a paw, the delicate imprint of a claw. Then, slowly, it releases them back into the night. And so the listener is led into the shadows along the shore, where paw prints appear in wet sand and vanish again, as though the river itself is writing and erasing names. One set of tracks begins confidently, then stops. Another circles as if doubting. A smaller set, almost too light to see, moves close to the reeds, as though not wishing to be noticed. A hush hangs over it all. The air feels veiled, celestial, sacred, like the inside of an abandoned temple where the roof is open to starlight. It is said the river did not test who was strongest. It tested who could cross the unknown without breaking their spirit. Some believe each animal arrived carrying its own secret weight, not in the body, but in the heart. The ox, steady as ancient earth, brought patience, an old virtue that doesn't glitter but endures. The tiger brought courage, sharp and bright, yet tempered by the river's cold indifference. The rabbit brought softness, an almost unbearable tenderness, like a small lantern trying to stay lit in wind. And the dragon, the dragon brought something stranger still. Not speed, not dominance, but mercy. It is said the hidden rules were never spoken aloud, because spoken rules can be argued with. But silence cannot be debated. Silence only asks you to reveal yourself. So the river asked, who waits when they could push? Who helps when no one is watching? Who deceives without rage? And who deceives with a tremor of guilt? Beneath the silence, the crossing becomes less like a contest and more like a mirror. Each creature sees its own reflection in the black water, twisted by ripples, softened by mist, haunted by moonlight. And somewhere unseen, the Jade Emperor watches, not with judgment that burns, but with a calm that feels like stone. The sacred contradiction begins to bloom here, quiet as a night flower opening. A race, yes, but not the kind that shouts. A race where the loudest thing is breath. A race where the true struggle happens beneath the surface. Some believe the river was an altar, and each animal, stepping into it, became an offering. The listener drifts deeper into the myth, into the place where memory and dream are braided together. We begin to sense that the Zodiac was never meant to be merely a list, never meant to be recited like a simple order. It was a sealed chamber of choices, a spiral carved into time, a celestial will held together by temperament, not muscle. In the distance, the silhouettes of broken statues rise from the riverbank, cracked faces turned toward the water, their mouths worn away by centuries of wind. They seem to warn of something. That selection always costs something. That being counted is not the same as being understood. Where memory fades, a soft melancholy arrives. Because even in myth, not everyone makes it across. Some creatures were late. Some turned back. Some never heard the invitation at all. And no one knows what became of them. Were they forgotten, or were they simply never meant to be named? Whispers tell us there were others at the edge of the river that night, watching from the reeds, waiting beneath overhanging stones, listening from the dark hollow of trees. Creatures without a place in the 12 chambers, creatures that slipped away before dawn and left no clean footprint. Perhaps that is the truest secret. Not who won, but who vanished. The listener is guided to sit with this quiet ache, to feel how the story holds both wonder and absence. The Zodiac, so celebrated, still contains an emptiness, a silence shaped like a missing name. And then, slowly, the river returns to stillness, as if the night has closed its hand around the moment. The moon remains, pale and patient, casting silver across the water's surface like a thin sheet of starlight. The reeds do not move. The stones do not speak. The paw prints soften until they are only shadows of impressions. It is said the river kept a secret, that it swallowed the sound of hooves, the flutter of feathers, the hush of scaled bodies sliding through cold water. And when dawn came, the world found only the ordinary again, mist lifting, birds calling, villagers waking, never knowing that a sacred counting had taken place in the dark. The chapter ends where it began, beside the moonlit river that seems older than memory. Calm, unreadable, listening still. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the Zodiac is not an answer, but a doorway, one that opens only when the world grows quiet enough to hear it. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that before any great story begins, the world grows quiet enough to be addressed, not by kings, not by crowds, but by the small, sacred language of signs. Tonight we begin beneath a sky scattered with starlight, like grains of rice on dark cloth. Each point of light a patient witness, each glimmer a distant breath. The heavens feel attentive here, as if they have leaned closer, not to speak loudly, but to listen for what rises from the earth. Below this sky, in forgotten corners of the world, there's a courtyard that has not changed in 1,000 dreams. Its stones are pale and worn smooth, its walls softened by moss and time. Night jasmine spills its scent into the air, sweet and faint, like a memory that refuses to fade. A lantern hangs beneath the eaves. It does not sway, and yet, at the edge of vision, it flickers once, as if answering something unseen. Whispers tell us this is how the summons began, not delivered by hand, not carved into decree, but carried by omen, a brief shimmer of flame, a breeze that arrives without reason, a dream of gates opening on the far side of sleep. Marked by the moon, the courtyard becomes a threshold. The shadows lengthen like ink poured across stone, and in that ink the invitation is written, not in letters, but in feeling. Come if you can. Come if you're listening. Some believe the first to receive it were not the powerful, but the attentive, the ones who notice when the air changes. A rat, awake in the quiet cracks of the world, hears the bamboo whisper a name. An ox, heavy with patience, feels the soil beneath its hooves tighten slightly, as if the earth itself was spoken. A tiger, far in the hills, pauses mid-breath when the wind shifts direction, because the wind carries a scent that does not belong to the present. A rabbit, hidden in grass, lifts its head without knowing why, and the stars above seem to tilt gently toward it. We do not rush to the race. We linger here, in the moments before, because this is where the mystery lives. This is where destiny is not a shout, but a soft pressure in the chest, like a hand resting lightly over the heart, asking without forcing. The invitation does not demand proof. It does not test strength yet. It simply asks, will you come? Beneath the silence, we begin to sense how each creature receives the call differently. Some through hunger, because hunger is a compass that never sleeps. Some through pride, because pride hears challenges even when none are spoken. Some through instinct, because instinct is older than language, older than fear. In a mountain monastery, where stone steps spiral upward into fog, It is said a dragon heard the summons as a tremor in the clouds, an echo in the sky's own throat. Not a command, not a threat, a request. And the dragon, ancient and veiled, did not roar. It simply turned its gaze toward the unseen gate. In an abandoned temple, broken statues stare into darkness. Their faces are crumbled, their hands chipped away, yet the air around them still carries the residue of prayer. There, a snake slides through dust and pauses, as if listening to the language of ruins. A single torch flame bends toward the doorway, and the snake understands. Some believe that fate always arrives this way, quietly, through the corner of the eye. Easy to miss, impossible to forget. As the signs continue, the night itself feels like a scroll being unrolled, not for humans, but for time. The zodiac begins to reveal its deeper shape, not only as a tale of animals, but as a mirror for human seasons. 12 chambers of temperament, 12 doors in a long hallway of years. A year is not just a circle. It is a ritual that returns. And each sign is a chamber where a certain kind of spirit rests. The ox, a room of endurance. The tiger, a room of courage. The rabbit, a room of quiet hope. The dragon, a room of power tempered by mercy. The listener is invited to walk these chambers in the mind slowly, like passing through sacred halls lit by dim lanterns. Each doorway holds a different air. Each threshold changes the weight of breath. Yet even in this gentle architecture of meaning, a contradiction hums like distant thunder beneath a calm sky. Why these animals and not others? Why a dragon beside a rat? A rabbit beside a tiger? Why should such vast difference sit together in the same constellation? It is said that the question itself is part of the invitation, because the zodiac is not only a story of who arrived, it is also a story of who did not. Where memory fades, we can almost see the missing creatures, shadows at the edge of the courtyard, silhouettes behind bamboo. Some believe there were others who heard the call but did not answer, others who came close to the gate and turned away, and some whisper something stranger still, that certain names were erased, like ink washed from stone, that the zodiac we know is not the full list, but the surviving list, the part of the ritual permitted to remain. There's an old kind of sacred secrecy in that thought, a sealed chamber within the chamber, a hidden hallway behind the hallway, because once you imagine missing signs, you begin to feel the shape of absence in the story. You begin to hear what is not said, and the night grows deeper. The lantern in the courtyard flickers again, softer this time, and then steadies, like a heartbeat returning to calm. The jasmine scent lingers. The stones hold their quiet warmth. Overhead, the starlight continues, scattered and serene, offering no explanation. It is said the sky watched the choosing, as if watching a candle burn, not rushing it, not interrupting, simply bearing witness. And perhaps that is the final truth this chapter offers. The heavens do not always speak in answers. Sometimes they speak in invitations. A glimmer, a dream, a gate opening for a moment behind the eyelids. The chapter closes with the sky still watching. The starlight does not explain, it only shines. And the listener is left with a quiet feeling that fate often arrives as a gentle invitation. So light it can pass through your fingers, yet so true it can stay with you for a lifetime. Perhaps it was never meant to be found in daylight. Perhaps it only appears when the world is quiet enough to notice. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that some stories do not begin with a trumpet, but with an ember, a small coal, glowing in the quiet, as if it holds the last warmth of an ancient room. Around it, the darkness gathers patiently, soft as velvet, heavy as sleep. And in that gentle dimness, a familiar tale is spoken again, the one most often told, not shouted, not performed, simply offered, like a cup of warm tea placed into waiting hands. The animals gathered, it is said, for a great race, and the first 12 would be remembered forever. The listener recognizes the outline immediately. It sits in memory like a well-worn stone, smooth, comforting, easy to hold. Yet as the voice guiding us begins to move, it moves slowly, like stepping into an old chamber where the air still tastes of incense and dust. It honors what is known, yes, but also listens for what has been covered, because beneath the silence, even familiar stories have hidden doors. We walk gently through the official sequence. Rat, ox, tiger, rabbit. Each name is spoken like a bead slid between fingers, one at a time, with a soft pause, with reverence. And with each name, a faint image stirs, for damp with river mist, eyes reflecting moonlight, the hush of bodies waiting at the edge of water. But this is not a chapter that rushes toward finish lines. Here, we linger in the moments most storytellers skim past, the quiet before dawn, when the world has not yet decided what it will become. We listen for the sound of water in the dark. We notice the way breath fogs the air, rising and dissolving like prayer. We feel the ground beneath the animal's feet. Cold earth, star-marked stones, wet sand that keeps secrets better than scrolls. Whispers tell us the race did not feel like a spectacle. It felt like a ritual crossing, a pilgrimage across uncertainty. The river, in this version, is not merely an obstacle. It is a gate, a threshold, an ancient mouth of silence that must be entered. Its surface is black and still, reflecting the sky, as if the sky itself has come down to watch. Marked by the moon, the water becomes sacred, because water remembers. Water holds echoes. Water keeps the sound of hooves and claws long after the air forgets. Some believe that the Jade Emperor watched from beyond a veil, unseen, unannounced. Not with applause, but with attention, as if what mattered was not the racing, but what each creature revealed in the crossing. And so, as the story unfolds, we begin to feel its deeper shape, 12 chambers of temperament, arranged not only by speed, but by something quieter. Endurance, courage, softness, mercy, cunning. And yet, there's one detail that always returns like a whisper against stone. The rat and the ox, the most whispered contradiction. We drift toward it as though approaching a lantern in fog, careful, curious, unwilling to disturb the hush. The ox, it is said, entered the river with steady devotion. No boasting, no hesitation. A great, patient body moving through cold current, as if duty itself were a prayer. And the rat, small as a breath, came too. In the version most often told, the rat rides upon the ox. There are many ways to tell this part. Some say the rat was clever. Some say the rat was simply small, and smallness must find its own path through the world. Others speak more quietly, as if afraid the ember might dim. They call it theft wrapped in silence, a borrowed crossing, a hidden advantage. But the chapter does not accuse. It only holds the question, gently, like a lantern. In a world of sacred selection, where does fairness sleep? The listener is guided from curiosity into softer melancholy here, not because the story becomes cruel, but because it becomes human. We sense how myths preserve not only heroes, but unease, not only lessons, but contradictions that cannot be polished away. Because perhaps the Zodiac, for all its beauty, was never meant to be perfect. Perhaps it was meant to be true. Some believe the rat's leap at the end, springing from the ox's back to claim first place, was the first crack in the story's smooth stone. The first moment where we realize that being remembered is not always granted to the most deserving. And still the ox does not roar. The ox does not chase. The ox simply steps onto the far bank, water dripping from its sides like a blessing, eyes calm as ancient earth. The rat lands first, bright and quick, and the order is set. Rat, ox, tiger, rabbit, a polished sequence. Comforting, repeatable, yet beneath the silence, something stirs, like a shadow behind a curtain. Because once you notice the contradiction, you begin to wonder what else has been hidden, what else has been softened, edited, veiled. Where memory fades, the story becomes a chamber with more than one doorway. The version most often told is like a polished stone, yes, smooth in the hand, worn by repetition, but it is also incomplete. The way a temple ruin is incomplete, beautiful, haunting, and missing whole walls. Perhaps there were other animals who came, but were not counted. Perhaps there were detours, quiet mercies, Unseen sacrifices the story does not mention because it prefers a clean order. Perhaps the Jade Emperor's choosing was not only a race, but a negotiation between what the world needed and what the world could accept. And perhaps, somewhere in the river's black mirror, the true Zodiac still waits, star-marked, oceanic, echoing in chambers of water and time. The chapter returns to the ember. It glows faintly now, smaller than before, as if the story has taken some warmth and carried it away. The darkness around is deeper, softer, more forgiving. It is said that the most familiar tale is not always the most complete. Sometimes it is simply the one that fits in the palm. And so we let the polished version rest there, smooth, comforting, and unfinished. We do not force an answer. We do not demand certainty. We only sit beside the dying ember and listen to the silence around the story, where the shadows keep their own quiet order. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the truest version lives not in the center of the tale, but in the places the tale avoids. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that dawn does not arrive all at once. It comes quietly, like a page turning in a sealed room, before the sun lifts itself into the sky. The world is still half dreaming, streets empty, rooftops damp, and air so cool it feels like it was poured from stone. In a narrow alley of early light, puddles gather in the uneven ground, and each puddle holds a pale reflection of the waking heavens, as if the sky has come down to practice being seen. Here, in this in-between hour, marked by the moon's last faint glow, the rat appears, not with drama, not with malice, only as a small shadow with bright eyes. Beneath the silence, it moves like a thought slipping through the mind, quick, quiet, precise. A creature shaped by survival's quiet mathematics, where every crumb matters, every sound is information, every opening is a possible doorway. Whispers tell us the rat heard the summons first, not because it was favored, not because heaven bent low to speak its name, but because it listened where others slept. Some believe the invitation to the Zodiac did not arrive as a proclamation, but as a tremor in the air, a shift in the wind, a faint lantern flicker, a dream of gates opening behind the eyelids. Those who were awake to subtle things heard it. Those who were always waiting for danger, always reading the world's smallest signals, noticed. And the rat, always noticing, lifted its head. In forgotten corners of the earth, this is how destiny begins. Not with a roar, with a pause, with a tiny breath held for half a heartbeat. The rat steps out of the alley and into the wider hush of morning. Roof tiles bead with dew. The stones beneath its feet are cool and star-marked with old cracks that resemble constellations. Somewhere, a temple bell does not ring, but the air feels as if it almost could. We follow the rat through the quiet city edges toward the river, where the land opens and the world becomes older. The river waits like a dark ribbon, smelling of stone and cold reeds. Mist clings low to its surface, curling like incense smoke in a sacred hall. On the far bank, the horizon is still dim, a soft line between night and day. The rat stops at the water's edge, and for a moment it seems small, not in spirit but in body. This is a river that does not care about cleverness or ambition. It cares about crossing. It cares about weight and current and patience. The water holds itself with that ancient calm that belongs to things that have seen 1,000 choices made and unmade. It is said the rat did not panic. It watched. It listened. It waited for the world to reveal a seam. Then, from the mist, the ox arrives, not as a rival, as a presence, like a moving hill, patient as earth, broad and steady, shoulders rising and falling with slow breath. The ox does not boast. The ox does not hurry. The ox carries no sharp hunger in its eyes, no restless thirst to be first. It simply approaches the river as if duty is a prayer, as if crossing is something you do because it is asked of you, because the invitation has been heard, and the answer is to walk forward. Marked by the moon's fading light, the ox steps into the water. The river receives it with a muted sound, a soft parting, a ripple that spreads and disappears into fog. The ox moves through the current with steady devotion. No tricks, no schemes. Only endurance, quiet and unquestioning. And here, the rat makes its choice. A choice tucked beneath the sleeve of myth. Some believe the rat climbed onto the ox without ceremony, as naturally as a leaf settling onto a drifting log. Others imagine a moment of hesitation, a tiny pause, a flicker of conscience, a calculation wrapped in silence. Because the rat understands the river. The rat understands that survival is not always beautiful. It is often quiet. It is often unseen. It is often misunderstood. So the rat rides, not because it hates the ox, not because it wishes to steal glory with cruelty, but because it senses the gate is opening, and it knows it may not open again. As they cross, the world feels suspended, river mist like a veil, the sky brightening slowly above, the air cold enough to sharpen every breath. The ox pushes forward, steady and faithful. The rat stays low, hidden in the warmth between shoulder and neck, listening to the water's voice. And then, when the far shore draws near, when wet sand waits like a threshold, there is the moment the tale never fully resolves. The leap. At the final breath, the rat springs forward, landing first. A small shadow arriving before a mountain, a spark reaching the altar before the candle. It is said the order of the Zodiac was set in that instant, and yet the story does not shout triumph. It hums with question, because deeper meanings rise like mist. Some believe the rat represents the mind's quick doorways, the ability to find passage through tight spaces of fate, to see openings where others see walls. In the long corridors of human life, this quality matters. There are times when strength alone cannot save you. There are times when patience cannot outrun hunger. The rat carries that uncomfortable truth. And still, a contradiction remains. Does cleverness belong beside virtue? Does a quiet strategy deserve the same sacred recognition as steady devotion? The listener is not asked to judge harshly. The chapter does not place a crown or a curse. It only invites contemplation, soft as a hand resting on the shoulder. Because perhaps the Zodiac is not a moral lesson with clean lines. Perhaps it is a mirror, and mirrors do not accuse. They simply show. The chapter closes at the river's edge, where footprints blur. The wet sand holds traces of the crossing. Hoof marks, tiny paw prints, the faint drag of water's retreat. But even these records soften quickly. Mist returns. The river smooths itself into stillness again, as if it has swallowed the moment whole. Where memory fades, the rat's shadow slips into history. Not as a villain, not as a hero, as a reminder that sometimes the first is not the strongest. Only the one who knew where the silent gate would open. Perhaps it was never meant to be fully understood. Perhaps it was only meant to be remembered, like starlight on water, fading as morning arrives. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that before the sun shows its face, the world practices stillness. Fields lie open and quiet, stretching like wide cloth across the earth. The horizon is faint as a breath, barely there, barely promised. Above it, the last threads of night remain, colored in dusk sky blue and soft gray, as though the heavens are reluctant to let go. In that wide calm, the ox stands, not moving, not restless, simply present, as if it has always been there. An ancient figure carved from patience itself. The air around it feels sacred, not because anyone is watching, but because the world is watching through silence. Dew clings to grass. Mist settles low in shallow hollows. The soil holds its dark scent like a secret. Whispers tell us the ox did not crave immortality in the Zodiac. It did not dream of being first. It did not sharpen its ambition like a blade. It simply answered the call as it answers every season, with steady steps and a quiet back built for burdens. Some believe the summons came in the same way it came to all of them, not by trumpet, but by omen. A lantern flicker in a temple courtyard, a wind that shifted direction too suddenly, a dream of gates opening in the dark, and a voice, soft as reed hush, saying only, "Come if you can." The ox heard it and did not argue. The ox heard it and did not question whether it deserved it. It simply turned and began to walk. We follow the ox toward the river crossing, but this chapter is less about movement and more about presence. It is not a tale of speed. It is a slow ritual of endurance. The hooves press into soft mud with a sound that is almost comforting. Thick, gentle, steady. Each step is a small agreement with the earth. The ox does not rush through the morning. It carries the morning forward. Beneath the silence, you can hear the subtle creak of effort, the quiet music of a body that has learned to serve without complaint. The ox's breath rises in pale clouds and dissolves, as if it is offering prayers it does not name. In forgotten corners of the world, people once lived by animals like this, by their patience, their strength, their steady willingness. The ox was a companion to harvest and drought, to planting and pulling, to the long, unglamorous labor that keeps life moving when no one is singing. So when the ox walks toward the river, it feels like watching time itself take a step. The river appears through mist like an ancient line drawn across the land. Its surface is dark, and the reeds along its edges stand upright like watchers in a sacred hall. Broken stones, star-marked and crumbled at the banks. There's the scent of cold water and wet earth, the smell of a threshold. Marked by the moon's last faint light, the ox pauses, not from fear, from respect. Then it steps into the water. The river receives it with quiet resistance, a slow pull, a cold embrace. The ox leans forward and continues, as if duty has weight, and it must be carried across. And here, softly, almost invisibly, the rat returns. Not loudly, not with fanfare, like a secret passenger. Some believe the rat had been waiting in the shadow of reeds, listening for the moment the river would be entered. Others imagine it appeared from nowhere, as small creatures sometimes do, as if they are born from the cracks between seconds. The rat climbs onto the ox, without ceremony, without gratitude spoken aloud. A tiny presence on a great back, and the contradiction arrives, wrapped in fog. The ox's kindness is used, yet the ox does not turn bitter. Beneath the silence, we feel the ache of this moment, not sharp, not angry, but deep. The kind of sorrow that does not shout, because it is too old for shouting. Some believe this is the hidden lesson the Zodiac rarely says aloud. Virtue is not always rewarded with first place, but virtue becomes the ground beneath all things. The ox continues. It does not buck the rat into the river. It does not shake its shoulders in protest. It carries what it carries, because that is what it has always done. In that steady crossing, the ox becomes more than an animal. It becomes a chamber of endurance, a sacred vessel for the world's weight. It carries not only itself, but the burdens that cling to life, quietly, endlessly. The listener is guided into the rhythm of this patience, and something inside begins to slow. Breath becomes softer. Thoughts become wider, like the open fields before sunrise. It is the kind of calm that arrives when you realize strength does not need to announce itself. And yet, as the far bank approaches, the story's known shape returns. The rat leaps, a small shadow springing forward at the final breath, landing first on wet sand. And the order is set. The ox arrives second, not defeated, not diminished, simply second. The emotional journey turns here to quiet melancholy, the kind that arrives when you realize fairness is not the ruler of myth or of life. Because how often does the world crown the loudest, the quickest, the most cunning? How often does it forget the ones who carried everything to the shore? Where memory fades, you can almost see the river smoothing itself again, erasing prints, swallowing the sound of the crossing. The world does not pause to correct the order. The heavens do not rewrite the moment. The ox stands on the far bank, water dripping from its sides like a blessing. The air trembles with the first hint of sunrise. The horizon brightens slowly, as though dawn is being carried into being. And then dawn finally breaks. Golden hour light spills over the fields and the river alike, turning mist into pale fire. The ox stands in that new light, and there are unnamed emotions in its eyes. Something like acceptance, something like tired tenderness, something like the quiet knowledge that carrying is its own sacred role. It is said the world is built on such shoulders, not always honored, not always thanked, but essential as earth. The chapter ends in a hush, with the ox still standing, the morning fully awake now, and the river behind it holding its secrets. The listener is left with a soft truth, one that does not demand applause, To carry the world is still holy, even if history crowns someone else. Perhaps it was never meant to be fair. Perhaps it was only meant to be true. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that the sky has corridors the earth cannot see, pale passageways where clouds drift like slow thoughts, and wind moves as if it has all the time in the world. In these high, quiet halls, the light is softer, dusk sky blue washed thin, like watercolor on ancient parchment, and when you look upward long enough, you begin to feel that the heavens are not empty. They are attentive. Beneath the silence, the chapter opens there, where the world is held gently from above. And here, the contradiction begins. The dragon should be first, so the story says. A creature of wind and storm, of skyfire and oceanic depth, a being that could cross rivers in a single breath, that could rise above any gate, that could arrive before any hoof had touched the mud. And yet it does not. This is the sacred contradiction at the heart of the Zodiac, the dragon arriving after smaller beings. The listener is invited into the mystery as if stepping into a temple where the obvious answer has been gently removed, leaving only echoes and questions, and the soft hum of something unseen. Where memory fades, we notice the dragon not as spectacle, but as restraint. It moves through the sky without boasting. No thunder is required. No tearing of clouds, no roaring flame. The dragon's presence is felt in subtler ways. A pressure change in the air, a sudden hush among birds, the faint metallic scent of rain that has not yet fallen. Whispers tell us the dragon heard the summons written in starlight, the same invitation that drew all creatures toward the river's gate. Come, if you can, and be counted. The dragon could have answered with speed. Instead, it answered with something rarer. It is said the dragon paused to bring rain to a thirsty land. In forgotten corners of the earth, farmers looked up at empty skies and saw only dust. Fields cracked like old pottery. The air tasted of clay red and despair. And then, without warning, clouds gathered slowly, reverently, like monks assembling for prayer. The dragon moved among them, not as a conqueror, but as a caretaker. It loosened the sky's sealed mouth. It let water fall in soft sheets, turning dust into dark soil again, turning brittle stems into living green. The rain arrived not as a storm, but as mercy. Marked by the moon's fading glow, the dragon lingered until the land had drunk enough. Another whisper drifts through the legend, quieter still. Some believe the dragon paused at the river itself, where the crossing had already begun. Not to race, because a dragon does not need a river, but to watch. And there, beneath the waterline, it sensed a struggling breath, a drowning soul, animal or spirit, no one knows, caught in the river's cold teeth, pulled down by current and fear. The dragon descended without spectacle. It did not announce its saving. It simply moved, lifting the small life from the dark pull, setting it gently on the bank, unseen by those who were already running toward their own destiny. The outline lingers on these quiet detours, framing them not as delay, but as devotion, because the dragon becomes something unexpected here, a symbol of power guided by compassion, strength that bows to suffering. And as we deepen, the river below reflects the dragon's shadow, long and veiled across black water, rippling as if the river itself is trying to remember the shape of mercy. Beneath the silence, the listener begins to sense a spiritual context. The Zodiac is not a scoreboard. It is a moral constellation. 12 chambers of temperament arranged to hold the world in balance, courage beside gentleness, patience beside hunger, cunning beside devotion. Not a list of winners, but a map of human seasons. Yet even this meaning has a veil, because the question returns, softly persistent as mist. If the dragon is so great, why is it not first? Some believe the answer is virtue. Others whisper something stranger. Politics. An unseen hand reshaping the order to keep heaven balanced. It is said that in the celestial courts, beyond the reach of mortal hearing, there are rules older than fairness. Not cruel rules, not kind rules, simply rules of equilibrium. The dragon, too powerful to stand at the head without tilting the whole constellation, may have been placed where it could shine without burning. Or perhaps the dragon itself chose to arrive later, not for mercy, but from wisdom, understanding that the first position is a heavy crown, and crowns draw hunger and resentment like moths to flame. The possibility hangs in the air like incense smoke, never confirmed, never denied. Where memory fades, the story becomes less about arrival and more about what arrival means. Because the dragon's late entrance changes the listener's understanding of greatness. Greatness is not always the one who arrives first. Sometimes greatness is the one who pauses, the one who notices thirst, the one who hears a drowning breath beneath the current, the one who does not race past suffering simply because the finish line is near. And so, at last, the dragon turns toward the far shore. Dawn is lifting now. The sky lightens in slow layers. Mist curls above the river like a veil being drawn aside. The other animals have already crossed. Their footprints are pressed into wet sand, already beginning to blur as water smooths the edges. The dragon arrives without urgency, breath steaming softly in the morning air. Not triumphant, not bitter, untroubled by rank. It stands at the threshold of land and water, and the world seems to settle around it. The river does not resist now. The sky does not flare. Everything simply allows. The final reflection is tender and still. The listener is left with a calm ache, the kind that feels like wisdom entering quietly. Perhaps the greatest beings do not rush to be remembered, because they already belong to the sky. Perhaps it was never meant to be won. Perhaps it was only meant to be lived. Some voices only echo. It is said that there are places where sound forgets how to travel. Stone corridors beneath old temples, passageways carved into mountains, halls where lantern light barely reaches the corners, and the air tastes of dust and age. In these sacred tunnels, even footsteps feel like prayers, soft, careful, almost unwilling to disturb what sleeps in the walls. Tonight, we begin in such a corridor. The light is low, torch-like and trembling. Faded copper lanterns hang from hooks set into crumbled stone. Their glow moves like slow breath across the floor, revealing spiral carvings and star-marked scratches that look like constellations drawn by a restless hand. Beneath the silence, something shifts. Not loudly, not with spectacle. The snake does not announce itself. It appears as a soft movement, a whisper against dust. A thin shadow passing through the lantern's reach, then slipping back into the darker seam where the stone meets itself. If you blink, you miss it. If you listen too hard, you hear only your own breath. And yet the corridor knows it is there. The dust knows. The stones remember. Whispers tell us the snake's place in the Zodiac was not won by speed. It was won by timing, by knowing when to be seen, and when to become part of silence itself. The story unfolds like a slow riddle, and the listener is guided not toward answers, but toward awareness. The quiet kind that arrives when you stop trying to force meaning and begin to notice what is already moving. In forgotten corners of the earth, people have always feared and revered snakes for the same reason. They live close to the world's hidden currents. They do not stare at the horizon the way the horse does. They read the ground. They read vibration. They read the subtle tremor of approaching footsteps through the earth itself. So we drift with the snake through ruins, past broken statues whose faces have crumbled away, past stone gates half buried in sand-beige dust, past mossy thresholds where misty green shadows cling like old incense. The snake travels low, its body a living line of intention. It does not waste motion. It does not hurry. It moves as if the world is a map written in pressure and warmth, and it knows how to read it with its skin, marked by the moon. Though the moon is far above these corridors, the snake becomes a symbol of the unseen, a creature that understands that not all doors open to force. Some doors open to patience, to stillness, to the exact moment when the world is briefly unguarded. And then, corridor opens. The story shifts from stone to open air. Outside, the world is cool and wide. The river is somewhere beyond, dark, oceanic, reflecting a sky that has not yet decided whether it belongs to night or morning. Mist drifts low over reeds. Broken pillars stand like silent witnesses. And into this open hush comes the horse. The horse arrives with open strength, breath flaring in the cool air, bright as a small cloud. Hooves strike the earth with clarity and confidence, each step ringing like intention. The horse's presence is a kind of honesty. What you see is what you get: muscle, momentum, a body built to carry distance. The listener feels it immediately. The horse seems like it should outrank the snake. It seems like it should arrive first, because it is swift and bold and unhidden. Yet the contradiction emerges like a subtle crack in stone. How does the snake outrank the horse? Whispers tell us many versions. Some believe the snake simply waited, still as a carved symbol, until the final threshold, then slipped forward when the world was looking elsewhere. Others say the snake moved along the riverbank, where reeds made secret pathways, where sand held warmth, where every vibration could be measured. And then there is the most whispered version of all. Some believe the snake hid in the horse's mane, not as a dramatic act, as a quiet choice, a concealment folded so neatly into shadow that it became almost invisible, an echo of the rat and the ox, repeating in a new key. The horse, powerful and earnest, carries forward. The snake, silent and patient, holds itself in stillness, becoming part of the horse's own movement, borrowing the wind without making a sound. And at the threshold, when the far shore is near, when the river's law begins to loosen, when the world is about to count names, the snake reveals itself, a soft uncoiling, a sudden presence, a shadow stepping out of shadow. The horse arrives, breath heavy, eyes bright, honest effort written across its body like sweat on stone. And just before the moment is sealed, the snake is there, already in place, already counted. The listener is not asked to gasp. This is not told as shock. It is told as a quiet lesson in perception, because the snake story is not really about cheating, or even about winning. It is about awareness. The secret doors of life rarely open to those who push the hardest. They open to those who notice, those who wait, those who understand timing, the sacred art of arriving at the exact moment when resistance softens. And yet, the moral uncertainty remains, gently held. Is concealment wisdom, or merely a softer theft? Beneath the silence, the listener is invited to sit with the question, as one sits beside a moonlit window, watching fog drift across a sleeping field, hearing distant water, feeling the world move without explanation. Because perhaps both things are true. Perhaps wisdom and theft sometimes wear the same cloak. Perhaps the Zodiac does not exist to judge, but to reveal the many ways beings survive the same world. The chapter returns to the stone corridor. Lantern light flickers again, soft and unsteady, painting moving shadows across the spiral carvings. The corridor seems deeper now, as if it has opened another hidden chamber in the mind. The snake's shadow slides along the base of the wall. Then, without a sound, it disappears into stone, and the hush remains thick and sacred, like dust settling after a prayer. It is said that sometimes the world is shaped most by what moves without sound, by what slips through the corners, by what waits for the quiet doorway to open. Perhaps it was never meant to be seen clearly. Perhaps it was only meant to be sensed. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that after rain, the world becomes briefly honest. The air turns clean and faintly cold, as if it has been rinsed. The ground darkens into richer earth tones, sandstone yellow softened by moisture, clay red made deeper, shadows made gentler. Puddles collect in shallow hollows and hold the sky's pale reflection like small, quiet mirrors. And in that wide plain, where mist drifts low like a veil, the dog runs. Not to win, not to be first, but because running is joy, because motion is its own kind of prayer. Beneath the silence, the dog's paws strike wet ground in quick rhythms, not desperate, not sharp, but light, like laughter that does not need permission. The dog's ears lift and fall with each stride. Its breath blooms in the cool air and dissolves again. It is said that when the summons for the Zodiac came, written in starlight, carried by omen, some animals heard it like a command. The dog heard it like belonging, a call that felt like a door opening in the chest, warm and familiar, a voice saying, "Not prove yourself, but come with us." Whispers tell us that this is why the dog ran, not toward a crown, toward a gathering, toward the simple relief of being included in the story. The outline guides us into a gentle melancholy, because joy, in a world of counting and order, often arrives with a cost. We follow the dog across the plain as dawn begins to lift itself slowly, like a lantern rising through fog. The river is somewhere ahead, dark and oceanic, its surface carrying the last breath of night. Broken stones line its edges, star-marked and crumbled. Reeds stand upright like silent witnesses. Yet the dog does not approach the river with a warrior's focus. The dog approaches it with wonder. It pauses at the bank, head lowered, sniffing the air where water meets earth. It watches ripples form from falling droplets, as if each ripple is a message written in circles. It steps into the shallows and splashes, not violently, but playfully, letting cold water climb its legs like a blessing. Beneath the silence, the dog seems to forget the race. Or perhaps it never believed it was truly a race. Perhaps it believed the crossing was simply part of the journey, like rain, like wind, like the smell of wet grass. We watch the dog linger. It sniffs the wind. It glances back, once, twice, as if searching for companions who may never come. That glance carries something tender, loyalty reaching beyond what is visible, devotion aimed at an absence. The dog's heart is built for togetherness. Even when alone, it behaves as if others should be near. In forgotten corners of the earth, people have always understood this. Dogs do not measure value in trophies. They measure it in presence, in returning, in waiting at the doorway until a familiar step is heard. And here, in the Zodiac's quiet ritual, that goodness becomes a kind of mystery, because the dog arrives later than expected, not because it could not cross, but because it stopped. Because it tasted life on the way. Because it treated water not as an enemy, but as a friend. Because joy called to it from the shallows, and it answered, the way it answers everything, with trust. As the chapter deepens, the contradiction sharpens softly. Why would heaven place such a faithful creature so near the end? If the zodiac is a moral constellation, a chambered map of virtues and temperaments, then surely devotion deserves a higher place. Surely loyalty should be crowned. Yet the story does not obey our wishes for fairness. Whispers tell us one explanation. Some believe the dog's delay was a lesson. Joy is sacred, but it costs. If you stop to splash, you will arrive later. If you pause to play, you may miss your moment. If you look back for companions, you may not see the gate opening ahead. In this version, the dog's place near the end is not punishment, but truth. A quiet reminder that delight is a choice, and choices shape destiny even when no one is watching. But there's another whisper, quieter and heavier. Some believe the order was decided long before the race, that the Jade Emperor's list was already etched into the hidden chambers of heaven, that the crossing was ritual, not competition, an enactment of fate rather than its creation. And if this is true, then the dog's delay did not matter. The dog was always meant to arrive when it arrived. The thought settles like dust on old wood. Not bitter, just sobering, because it suggests that goodness does not always rearrange the world. Sometimes the world remains as it is, and goodness must learn to glow within it anyway. Where memory fades, the river's surface reflects the pale sky. The mist thins. Footprints appear in wet sand and soften at the edges. The day grows brighter, but the story remains wrapped in sacred uncertainty. At last, the dog steps onto the far shore. Water drips from its fur, catching the first golden hour light in tiny beads, like dew on a leaf. The dog does not look ashamed. It does not look defeated. It looks content, as if it has crossed not for rank, but for the simple act of arriving. The final reflection is tender and still. The dog stands at the edge of the river, breath slow, ears relaxed, eyes steady. Behind it, the water smooths itself, hiding the splash and the pause, keeping the gentle delay as a private memory. And the listener is left with a calm truth that lingers in the chest, warm as a hand placed over the heart. Devotion is not always crowned, but it remains a warm light in the long night of time. Perhaps it was never meant to be rewarded. Perhaps it was only meant to endure. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. It is said that every circle has a place where it grows quiet, not from emptiness, but from completion. A final chamber where the light dims gently, where the air turns warmer and softer, where the world seems to fold inward as if preparing to dream. Tonight, we open not at a riverbank or beneath a gate of stars, but in a dim kitchen of the mythic world, an intimate room hidden behind the larger story. A pot sits over a low flame. Steam rises in slow ribbons, curling upward like prayers that have learned patience. The air smells of grain and warm earth, sandstone yellow dust softened by heat, clay-red embers breathing quietly in the hearth. Faded copper bowls and oxidized bronze hooks hang from dark beams. Everything feels old, sacred, lived in. Beneath the silence, the pig appears, not as laziness, but as softness. A creature that understands something the others forget in their hurry. Rest is not a weakness. Rest can be sacred. Whispers tell us the pig heard the summons like all the others. An invitation carried by omen, written in starlight, folded into the wind. Come, if you can, and be counted. The pig did not refuse. The pig set out with sincerity. But sincerity, for the pig, does not mean rushing. It means listening to the body's quiet truths. It means noticing hunger, noticing fatigue, noticing the warmth of a sunbeam on stone and the scent of rain before it falls. It is said the pig paused to eat, not greedily, as one receives a blessing. A simple meal, slowly taken, as steam rises and settles again. The pig chews with calm attention, as if each mouthful is a small act of gratitude. The race, if it is a race, remains somewhere beyond the door, distant as thunder behind mountains. Then the pig pauses to sleep, not collapsing, choosing, finding a patch of warm dust near the wall where sunlight once rested earlier in the day, curling down with a sigh so deep it feels like surrender to the earth itself. Outside, the world continues. Inside, the pig becomes still, breath slow, eyes half closed, the rhythm of life returning to its simplest form. The outline moves like a lullaby through these small, intimate scenes. The pig listening to rain on leaves. In forgotten corners of the earth, rain does not always sound urgent. Sometimes it arrives like gentle fingers tapping on an old roof. The pig listens, not trying to interpret, not trying to win, only listening, letting the sound fill the quiet spaces inside. The pig lying in warm dust. The dust is ancient and soft, holding faint spiral patterns where countless feet have passed. The pig's body settles into it as if returning home. The world feels kind in that moment, misty green shadows under trees, dusk sky blue light dimming at the edges. The pig waking without panic. No sudden bolt upright. No frantic glance toward the horizon. Only a slow opening of eyes, a calm inhale, the steady awareness that time has moved. And that is not a catastrophe. It is simply what time does. Beneath the silence, the listener is guided into a slower heartbeat. Here the race fades. The ritual of being alive becomes the true story. Yet the contradiction remains, softly persistent, like a question held in the palm. Heaven honors the pig, but places it last. Is this punishment? Or is it an acknowledgement that gentleness belongs at the closing of the circle? Like the final note of a song? Whispers tell us that in the celestial counting, the last place is not always an insult. Sometimes it is a threshold, a doorway into endings, into rest, into the quiet season when lamps are lit earlier and voices lower themselves naturally. Deeper layers emerge now, drifting in like mist. The zodiac is a year's wheel, a turning of 12 chambers, and the pig stands at the place where the wheel slows, where harvest ends, where granaries fill, where the air grows cooler and the world returns inward. The pig is not a champion of conquest, but a guardian of completion. In old villages, when the final bundles of grain are tied and carried, when the last field is walked and the last tool is set down, there is a hush that arrives. It is not sadness. It is closure. The earth has given what it can, and now it must sleep beneath winter's veil. The pig belongs to that hush. It embodies the truth that not all value is measured in speed. Some value is measured in softness, in the ability to stop, to eat, to sleep, to be human in the quietest way, without needing to prove anything. Still, some listeners may feel the ache of last place, because we are taught to chase, to arrive early, to be seen. And so the pig's position can feel like a dismissal. But the story does not dismiss the pig. The story keeps the gate open. Marked by the moon's faint glow, we return at last to the place where names are counted. The river's mist thins. The stones near the threshold are damp and cold. Footprints of the others have already softened in the sand. The air holds echoes, hooves, claws, wings, now mostly swallowed by time. The pig arrives late, breath slow, eyes calm, body warm from rest, and the gate does not shut in its face. It opens, not reluctantly, not with judgment, as if it has been waiting all along. The final reflection closes like a curtain being drawn gently across a lamp. The pig steps through the threshold and is counted, not as an afterthought, but as an ending that completes the circle. The listener feels the soft comfort of this, that the story itself makes room for rest, that heaven, in its strange ordering, still honors the one who did not hurry, and the chapter leaves the listener with sacred uncertainty that feels like peace. Perhaps being last is not failure. Perhaps it is the gentle way the story teaches us to rest. Perhaps it was never meant to be won. Perhaps it was only meant to be lived and then released. Some voices only echo when we are ready. It is said that some buildings are not made for bodies. They are made for years, in forgotten corners of the earth, beneath mountains that keep their own counsel, behind gates that open only in dream. There is an imagined hall carved from moonlit stone. Its pillars are pale and worn, as if they were shaped by tides of time rather than hands. The ceiling is high, veiled in dusk sky-blue shadow, and the air inside feels cool and ancient, like breath held in a sealed jar. Beneath the silence, 12 doorways wait, not with locks, with patience. Each doorway is a chamber. Each chamber is a season, and within each one, an animal's breath lingers, like incense trapped in glass, like an echo that has not yet found a wall to fade against. The listener is invited to walk slowly through this inner architecture, as if entering a sacred building where time itself kneels. Here, the Zodiac is not a list recited for amusement. It is a sanctuary, a temple of temperament, a quiet map of how the world holds itself together without breaking. Whispers tell us the first chamber does not shout its name. It flickers. The rat's room is narrow and alert, carved with small spiral grooves like hidden paths through stone. Lantern light here feels sharper, quicker. The air carries the sense of watchfulness, of listening where others sleep. It is said this chamber teaches the mind's quick doorways, the ability to see an opening in a wall, to survive when resources are thin, to move like a thought through cracks and fate. We step onward. The ox's chamber is wider, lower, grounded. The stone feels heavier underfoot, sandstone yellow deepened by shadow. There is a steady warmth here, like a hearth that never goes out. The air is thick with patience, and the faint sound of distant water seems slower. It is said this chamber holds endurance, quiet virtue, the kind that carries the world without demanding a crown. Marked by the moon, we enter the tiger's chamber, and the atmosphere changes again. Here the stone is etched with deeper lines, like currents carved by invisible claws. The air feels colder, not threatening, but truthful. Strength lives here, not as noise, but as pressure. The tiger's room teaches the sacred confrontation. What happens when will meets resistance, when power meets the impartial law of water, time, and fate? Then, like a softer breath, the rabbit's chamber opens. Light enters differently here, diffused, misty, almost tender. The floor is scattered with small stone fragments that resemble stepping stones across a dark river. The air feels gentle, but not weak. It is said this chamber holds the quiet leap, the ability to trust what you cannot prove, to find passage through fragility, to survive by timing and grace. And above, somehow above, even though we are deep inside stone, the dragon's chamber feels open to sky. Its ceiling is carved with star-marked constellations, oxidized bronze inlays gleaming faintly like distant starlight. The air tastes of rain that has not yet fallen. Here, the listener senses mercy, power guided by compassion, strength that pauses. It is said this chamber reminds the world that greatness is not always first. Sometimes greatness is the one that did not hurry. We drift onward, chamber to chamber, not listing but feeling. The serpent's room is a corridor within a corridor, lantern light barely reaching its corners, the silence so thick it feels sculpted. It is said this chamber belongs to perception, the unseen strategies of life, the secret doors that open not to force, but to awareness. The horse's chamber carries wind, open and honest, hooves imagined in the floor's worn grooves. The goat's chamber feels like hillside mist, gentle companionship, soft endurance. The monkey's chamber flickers with curiosity, quick hands of thought, laughter hidden inside stone. The rooster's chamber is dawn light and precision, the feeling of waking the world with a clear call. The dog's chamber holds devotion, warm, loyal, sometimes aimed at the wrong horizon, but holy nonetheless. And the pig's chamber, last, quietest, smells faintly of grain and rest, a closing lantern that teaches the sacred art of stopping. Beneath the silence, the mystery deepens, because the hall is too balanced to be accidental. 12 forces arranged like a constellation of temperaments to keep human life from tipping too far into any single extreme. Cunning beside virtue, power beside gentleness, hunger beside patience, joy beside duty, rest beside ambition. Yet a contradiction lingers in the air like mist. Who designed this balance? And what was the cost? Some believe the zodiac was a celestial map, an invisible calendar written in fur and scale, meant to guide emperors and farmers, lovers and mourners. A way of naming time, so it could be lived with more intention. In ancient China, calendars were never merely practical. They were sacred agreements with the heavens, woven into planting seasons, festivals, and the quiet logic of survival. Others whisper something stranger, that the zodiac was a binding spell, a ritual circle placed around chaos, locking it into a predictable wheel. 12 chambers, 12 doors, so the wild, oceanic forces of life would return in patterns rather than storms. So fate could be read, even if it could not be controlled. The outline holds these theories, like soft stones in the palm, not heavy enough to crush, not light enough to dismiss, because the truth, perhaps, is veiled. Perhaps the zodiac is both map and spell, both guidance and containment. Perhaps it comforted those who needed order, and unsettled those who sensed what order requires. Selection omission, the quiet erasure of other possibilities. Where memory fades, the listener notices the doors are not fully closed. They are half open, as if the chambers are always welcoming the next year back in, as if time itself is forever returning to the same hidden gate. In the final reflection, the hall quiets even further. The lantern glow steadies. The stone breathes its cold, ancient breath. Footsteps, ours imagined, become softer until they are no longer heard, only felt as faint echoes inside the ribs. The chambers remain, waiting, holding their incense breath of temperament and season. And the listener is left with gentle awe. The zodiac may be less a story about animals racing, and more a sanctuary of time, where each year returns, softly, to the same hidden gate. Perhaps it was never meant to be solved. Perhaps it was meant to be walked. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen.